Okay, Smith & Wesson 637 J-frame, air weight, tiny little, light 38 special plus P. Ruger LCR, also very, very light, mostly polymer with some lightweight steel. Also 38 special plus P. Head-to-head comparison. One of the concealed carry options that doesn't get discussed near as much lately as it used to be, and that is snub nose or snubbies. Small revolvers that you can throw in a pocket or an inside the waistband holster or even on your ankle. This has been the sort of detective special, if you will, and their Colt even had one called that, but it's been the quintessential concealed carry law enforcement gun forever, and civilians obviously adopt whatever law enforcement does until the tiny Wonder Nines came out with their microscopic size and much preferable capacities to these really reigned supreme. So I'm taking a look at two of the industry leaders. Smith & Wesson Airweight is obviously fairly legendary and really doesn't need a whole lot in the way of introduction, but I have heard nothing but good things about the Ruger LCR. I've never shot one, but I do blame Weirdbeard from Handgun Radio on Firearms Radio Network for constantly praising this gun and making me want one. So here it is. I'm going to take my first shots through both of these guns. I have not fired either one of these guns yet. So this will be the very first shots and just sort of getting acquainted with both of them. They're both 5 shots. All right, start out with the Smith for no particular reason, then it happened to be under my right hand. That shot good. You certainly, even with a 38, even with a regular 38 special load, which that is, you can definitely feel it. So the people who shoot the 357 airweights, I don't know how you even do it. My lip starts to quiver just thinking about it. Moving now to the LCR, also shooting the same 38 caliber, 38 special load. They feel different. I think after just 5 rounds through each, I think I feel the recoil more in the Ruger. If you want to take the sharpness of recoil out of it, one thing you can do to cheat, put on some shooting gloves. So I'm going to put on some gloves and run both of the guns. That'll take away that little bit of sting initially. Now the LCR, it's also a good way to evaluate how they shoot with gloves on. They are small. Well, they both handle a gloved finger pretty well. Now, these are not big, like, keep your hands warm gloves. These are just shooting gloves, but still. Okay, for these next ones, I'll let you see my little target downrange. That is about 13 yards downrange. That is my tactical AR 500 target. We can see, wow, did I just clip the very top? Holy cow. All right. I do have a tendency to hold way too high with these sights. That's better. Okay. I'm just curious if I shoot one of these better than the other, because I don't tend to shoot small revolvers all that well. I don't do it very often, so obviously I don't get a lot of practice at it. So could be why. There's some correlation between practice and perfect. I don't know. I keep hearing it. All right, let's try the Ruger. It's easier for me with these sights, I think. It's like a black notch. And then you got that white ramp. I'll show you that in a close-up. Yeah, I find it a little easier to get my sight picture correct with the Ruger. So I mentioned these are both 5-shot revolvers, and that is certainly a downside if you're interested in capacity. And today everybody is so interested in capacity, rightfully so. It's a valid concern. 6 rounds in a revolver this size is a little harder to do. It can be done, but it's not as easy to do. All right, let's try it again. Let's see if I can compose myself and at least start to put them all toward the middle of the target. Get some sort of trigger control going here. Okay, that felt better. I'm also trying to resist the temptation to use the available exposed hammer and cock it for single action, because that would be almost like cheating. Ruger does not have that capability. Not Ruger the company, Ruger this gun. The LCR is an internal hammer. As you can see, you have no option. I'll talk about that later. Okay, now let's see with a little bit of concentration how I can do with this one. Yeah. Yeah, it took me a minute, but I think I've got them both fairly well dialed in. They both shoot nice. There aren't really a whole lot of specs to talk about with 2 small revolvers, but let's go through the numbers. Probably the most important is the weight, and both of these are very, very light, but there is almost an ounce between them. The LCR is 13.5 ounces published weight, and the 637 is 14.3 ounces published weight. So the Smith is a heavier gun by almost a full ounce. That's not a whole lot, but I actually can feel the difference. Part of that, of course, is because we've got a lot of polymer in the frame of the LCR, and that is surrounding the aluminum alloy frame that it's attached to, whereas the Smith is all aluminum alloy except for where it's stainless steel, and we'll talk about where that is in a minute. The barrel is stainless steel in the Ruger, as is the cylinder. The cylinder is stainless steel and it is coated with a PVD finish, and it is a nice, attractive finish. The Smith & Wesson is, again, aluminum alloy frame. It is an airweight with a stainless steel cylinder and a stainless steel barrel. Overall lengths are very close as well. The LCR's overall length is 6.5 inches, 6.5. And the 637 comes in just a little bit shorter at 6.3. There's also a difference in height. Smith & Wesson didn't publish theirs, but I took a caliper to it and measured it myself, and what I came up with is about 4.25 inches tall, where the LCR is 4.5 inches tall. That quarter of an inch can make a big difference if you're trying to carry it, especially in deep concealment. Probably the biggest difference between these two guns in terms of numbers is the price. MSRP for the Smith & Wesson Model 637 is $469. The MSRP for the Ruger LCR, $579. Now, I'm lucky I paid considerably less than that. I happened to catch we're getting rid of some inventory at our cost sale at one of my local gun stores, and so I jumped all over it. And that's why I brought this guy home, because I got him for cheap. But normally, it's expensive. It is $110 more. So $110 more for the Ruger versus the Smith & Wesson. I don't know. I have to tell you, my honest opinion is I don't think there's $100 more value here versus here. I think these guns are so close in so many ways. There's definitely not a $100 bill worth of difference. All right, I'm going to change my ammo to some Remington UMC. The Remington in the green and white box. Just to see if they feel different or shoot different with different ammo. Everything else is the same. You hear that? Let me put it up here by the mic. Gotta love that. Smith & Wesson might be better just because it makes that cool revolver sound. Okay. Remington UMC through the Ruger LCR. They both shoot nice. They both shoot very nice. I have to tell you, just from the way these two guns feel shooting them, and from what I'm seeing in terms of target hits and all that, boy, it's a dead even toss-up. And the triggers are also very, very similar as well. So the only big difference between these two, of course, is the Smith & Wesson does have the hammer, the exposed hammer. They do make them without that, and they do make them that look very much like this with an internal enclosed hammer. This one just happens to have this exposed hammer spur. I'm okay with that, you know, for this gun, for me, but I'll talk more about that in a bit, whether that's an important thing or not. Okay, we really can't do a good head-to-head, can we, between two guns without checking the trigger on each. So I'm going to check the double action, of course, because that's all the Ruger has. So double action trigger on both. I'm going to use the Lyman digital trigger gauge, and we're going to start with the Ruger. £9 pounds, 14 ounces. And go to the Smith. No, game over. Please insert 25 cents and try again. I will try it again, but it is heavier. And I can tell you that's what I feel. Now, So I think I think the limit is 12 pounds on the Lyman gauge here. So I'm sure Smith & Wesson would tell you that that's less than 12 pounds, but in reality it's pulling at around that. So definitely a difference in the trigger pull. The Ruger has a lighter trigger, and you do feel that when you're shooting them. Okay, I'm going to put some on paper with some plus P. I've got about 3 different kinds of plus P here. I'm going to start with Remington Golden Saber. This is, let's see if they tell us here. It is 125 grain, but I don't see performance data. But 125 grain plus P. Starting with the Smith & Wesson. And that is on the right side of the target. All right. Looks like I threw at least a couple of them high, didn't I? Now with the LCR, going to the left side of the target. Okay, well, I did better, but I think part of it is I have an easier time with the sights on the Ruger. Ruger's done a nice job of giving us a fairly decent sight picture, even though it is that channel and notch type of picture. A little easier. All right, I'm going to move on now to another Remington Ultimate Defense, which I'm not sure I know the difference between this and Golden Saber. The rounds actually look the same to me too. It's also 125 grain, and I don't see any performance data either, so no published velocity or anything like that. So while I'm loading this up, let me pontificate for a moment on, I talked about hammer, exposed hammer versus not. An advantage to the exposed hammer is being able to cock the hammer and then have single action trigger, which is traditionally extremely light. It requires what feels like just a touch. Therein lies the issue. If this is a self-defense gun, you're going to carry this for self-defense, or even just have it in your home or vehicle or something like that for self-defense, and you have an exposed hammer on it. There are many documented cases, and I will credit Masad Ayub Group for my education on this, although I apologize that I don't have any citations in my head to provide specifics for. But there are numerous documented cases where prosecutors have tried to prosecute people who used a revolver in self-defense. And many of those cases were law enforcement officers claiming that they cocked the hammer and therefore had a hair trigger. You know, so there's a lot of inherent liability and the potential for those questions. If I decided tomorrow that I wanted to carry this gun, like if I just fell in love with it today here on the range and I said, man, I have just got to carry this, this is the stuff, I would take it to a gunsmith and have that hammer bobbed. I would make it so that I cannot cock the hammer with my thumb. I would have that spur removed, or I would buy one like it that already doesn't have a spur, has an internal hammer. So that's end of the lecture on that. I know people feel one way or another, but if that's not a situation or not a subject you were familiar with, then those are words of caution, and I would urge you to get more information for yourself on that. Okay, back to it. Ultimate Defense Remington, 125 grain plus P, 38 special. Both of these revolvers, by the way, eject the brass nicely, easily and cleanly. So I'm shooting I can see that I'm shooting the target's only 7 yards down range, by the way, now, so a little closer. And I can see that I'm shooting the Smith high. And I kind of noticed that right off the bat. I do prefer the sights on the Ruger. Okay, last up, Hornady Critical Defense 38 Special plus P, and this is a 90 grain light bullet, 90 grain FTX from Hornady, and they do give us some information on this one. 1,200 feet per second is our muzzle velocity. Muzzle velocity? And they're so pretty. They have that pretty pink insert to match my pretty pink steel target that I don't have up at the moment. They load them upside down in the box, which is almost annoying. So this is the last of the 3 different types of plus P I have. This is the Hornady Critical Defense 90 grain. Oh, that feels good. That feels good to shoot. I like that a bunch. That's very light, actually. Get that light bullet, so you don't need to push it as hard to get it to go as fast. That's the physics lesson for today. But that felt nice to shoot. If I was going to carry, I'd have to do some research on the ballistics of that round. But if I was going to have the 38 Special plus P for self-defense, that might be the load. Yeah, nice stuff. So, never mind how I feel about either of the guns. I love this ammo. This is good stuff. Let's focus for a moment just on the Smith & Wesson Model 637. This was the first time I had shot this gun. I've had it for quite a while, actually. I bought it, believe it or not, because of the serial number. It has an all zeros serial number, which I couldn't resist. So I've had it a long time, and I finally got around to shooting it because I had something to shoot it with. But what I really like about this gun, first and foremost, I love Smith & Wessons. I already said that. But it is tiny, it is light, highly concealable if that's what you need, but it's just a very well-made Smith & Wesson revolver. All the quality is there that you expect from a Smith, and yeah, that ratcheting sound we had at the range, I think that was probably just maybe needed a drop of oil or something, which it has since gotten. But Smith & Wesson has already proved itself with the air weights in the J-frame, so there's really not much that needs to be said to convince you whether the air weight J-frame is a good gun or not. Like I said, it's in a in a 38 Special Plus P. I think this is a nice viable consideration for a self-defense gun. Now, in a 357 Magnum, and you were going to carry and shoot 357 Magnums, I don't know. I've shot them. I don't own one. I've shot them, and it hurts. I don't enjoy it at all. Smith & Wesson sights, of course, are the long groove along the top of the frame. Okay, so you got that top strap there with that long groove, and then you've got a front sight that is essentially part of the barrel. Very basic. The grips, they do not say. The information on Smith & Wesson's website does not say it, and none of the information that came with the gun says it, but I believe these are Hogue grips. If they are not, they are certainly Hogue-inspired grips, so we'll go with that. All right, looking now at the Ruger LCR in 38 Special Plus P. This is also available in a 357 Magnum model, and this was sort of a purchase of opportunity for me. As I said, price-wise, there was I got it for cheap because somebody was having a big sale, and so, you know, I didn't make a choice between 38 Special and 357 deliberately. However, I probably would. I would probably still choose the 38 Special for all the same reasons. Although I have not shot the 357 LCR, and I would like to for comparison. But some of the things that I really like about this gun are, some people think it's horribly ugly. I mentioned Weird Beard earlier from my favorite podcast show, the Handgun Radio Show, and I said it really is his fault that I was even interested in this gun because he just praises it constantly. It is a bit, well, he calls it a bit of an ugly duckling. I don't find it to be as ugly as all that, but I think it's the whole hammerless revolver. It's hard to make a hammerless revolver not look weird to me, no matter who makes it. So I think that's the biggest part of it. If this was a smaller little backstrap here and you had a traditional hammer sticking up out of there, it would probably be an attractive little revolver. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. It's got some interesting points. Number one is this very, very aggressively fluted cylinder. Look at that. You look at that and you see, wow, man, that's a plus P, huh? It must be some strong steel, and it is stainless steel. Stainless steel is a strong steel, but it has to be able to hold a lot of pressure there. I like the front sight. I like the sight picture in general, and it is same as the Smith & Wesson in terms of you've got this long notch along the top strap, and then you just basically drop your front sight down into it, and that's your sight picture. The difference being this front sight, there's a white insert in there that makes it much more visible when you're shooting, and the other thing is there's a little pin right here that you can drift out, and you can change out that white for orange or yellow or green, whatever you might want. So there's you have some options with that. I like the grip a lot. It is a Hogue grip. It's very grippy and very cushiony, and that makes the gun comfortable to shoot. Took me a little bit to figure out exactly how I needed to hold it to best shoot it, but I think that this lower hold right here was what worked for me. Another thing I like a lot about this gun is the trigger itself. Now, Smith & Wesson has, kind of written the book on great triggers in revolvers for, over 100 years, but this one challenges it, and I think it bests it in this case between the two. It's a little bit lighter, but it's also I like the configuration of it, and I like the design of it. It's smoother, it's narrower, so it's not as wide a trigger. It falls a little more nicely into the notch that your finger joint creates, and it feels very comfortable on the edges. So as you're shooting, it's not irritating your finger, and I do like that a lot. So they've designed a nice trigger here. Maybe I can contrast that with the Smith & Wesson trigger. You can see the difference in the design of the two triggers, where the Smith & Wesson, you know, starts out up here, but really drops down 3/8 of an inch or more before you start to get into the real meat of the trigger. And then then the shape changes. So you've got a shorter shape there. The Ruger maintains like the exact same radius all the way down the length of the entire trigger. It's got a more polished face, it's narrower, and it's more nicely rounded on the edge. The Smith is wider, but it's also a little more square on the edges. A little bit more noticeable when you're shooting it. It makes you think about your finger being on the trigger and how that feels, where this one, you don't think about that so much. The guns are both sub 2-inch barrels, so, you know, basically same. You can see that here. There's almost identical in barrel length. They both accommodated my gloves fine when I was shooting with gloves on. The Ruger has a much larger trigger guard, but as you can see, the trigger kind of hangs in the middle of that, so most of that is not space you can use for your finger, at least not until you've got the trigger pulled all the way back. If you look at where the opening is, really, for a finger, they're just about the same. When it comes to revolvers, I have to admit a bias toward Smith & Wesson. I started my handgun owning life with the Smith & Wesson revolver, and I feel very fondly about them. But I have to tell you, I think I shot the Ruger LCR better today than I shot the Smith & Wesson. The first major difference that I noticed between the two guns that made me shoot the Ruger better was the sight picture. It was easier for me to find that natural sight picture, to drop that front sight down into the groove and hold it there than it was for the Smith. That took me a little bit. And even then, even after I sort of got it, I was still tended to be a little bit high and a little bit right. I also feel like, and this is extremely slim margin, but it feels like the Ruger LCR handles the recoil just a little bit better. Just a little bit better. Wait a minute, what? Didn't I just say the opposite earlier? Didn't I say earlier that I thought the LCR felt like it had more recoil? And now I'm saying it feels like it has less recoil. Alright, so before my credibility is completely shot, let me try and explain. So as in the course of the shooting, and this does happen in the course of shooting two different guns and comparing them, my opinions can change during the course of the day. So I think there's a couple of things that can contribute to why my perception changed. I think the first is I altered my grip. I think initially I had a really high grip, had the web of my hand really high up on the LCR, and then I moved it down because it just felt like it needed to be down lower, especially when you've got these finger grooves down in the grip. So I moved it down lower, which felt awkward because look how high that bore axis position is, but it's actually the best shooting position. And I found that once I had this grip, it shot much softer. So that's why, and it's relatively negligible. There's not a considerable difference between these two guns in respect to felt recoil, but I do think in the long run, a little less felt recoil through the Ruger. And where I'm noticing that is right in the web of your hand, right at the web between your thumb and your forefinger. The Ruger seems to handle it better, so you don't feel quite as much right there, and that makes shooting it a little more comfortable. Both of the guns handled everything perfectly well. They both handled the plus P loads great, and I got to tell you, I'm kind of in love with that Hornady ammo, so I'm going to do a little research on it and find out how those ballistics are for self-defense, because that would be the load. That would be the load to carry.